Hello, welcome back to Aetheral Space 11.21 Phoenix. We are back. Hello, Parnell.
Yes. Guys, Tanhoney has to be quiet because there's someone probably sleeping above him, I assume.
Yeah.
As with all good things that must end with Tanhoney, there's someone sleeping above him. So I will be doing the talking this episode. And Tanhoney just wanted me to tell you guys that he's just so grateful that you covered for him when he evaded his taxes. He really didn't think he'd get away with it, but he was really grateful to Banker Paul. He was really grateful to Banker Paul for laundering the money, and for Anomalous for diverting
Instant
some
kneecap
funds.
obliteration incantation. Vertigo.
In Vertigo.
Yeah, it flips your kneecap upside down inside your body.
But then it's not obliteration.
Yeah, obliterated the space it was previously occupying.
Stupid. Anyway, we're gonna read now, okay?
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. By compressing a joint in a human body and then quickly dislocating it, a sudden burst of force could be created. Whelan hath the law of constriction. With it, a single finger could strike as hard as a pistol. This was not an Aether ability. Ashdel Durin fired force from each of his knuckles as he planted his fist right into Vex Turna's chest, feeling the ribs splinter before his strength. The woman breathed in sharply, a breath that was surely made agonizing by broken bones, and in the same instant she went flying backwards. With her regeneration, that would not keep her down for long. Ash kicked off the ground, pursuing her, clicking his knuckles back into place as he ran. He didn't like to overuse Whelan Hath. The pain the technique produced was severe, but against an opponent like this, he wouldn't hold anything back. So wait, how is her regeneration different from, like, a Gene Tyrant's?
Well, basically, what she does is, when she transforms a little bit more to, like, kickstart the regeneration, and then transforms back to get the stability back.
Okay, so she can just do that indefinitely?
Oh yeah, pretty much. It's pretty much like super healing rather than shapeshifting.
Gene Tyrants who? Who needs them? If possible, he'd prefer to avoid body imaging too much. Self-inflicted cold could do just as much damage as this woman's feathers.
Oh, I think you skipped
Before Oh, sorry. As Vex flipped in the air, she fired another volley of feathers towards Ash, and he, already prepared, kicked up the bicycle that had been left lying on the floor. He caught it in midair, using it as a shield against the barrage, and tossed the vehicle aside just as it began to melt from the heat. If possible, he'd prefer to avoid body imaging too much. Self-inflicted cold could do just as much damage as this woman's feathers. Before Vex reached the ground, the holes in her wings finally closed, and with a mighty flap, she stopped her flight and sent a burst of wind surfing down the hallway. Ash, nearly upon her once again, had no choice but to temporarily cease his pursuit and brace himself, arms held up to withstand the onslaught. 0.5 seconds of Aether, just as the pressure swept past him, concentrated in just the parts of his body he needed to stay still. Individual joints and muscles, never entire limbs. The less Aether he needed to use and the less time he used it, the better. The instant the wind swept past, Ash charged forward again, fists already raised to attack Vex. I think what I would like here is, like, if we saw some description of him, like, physically aging, even just a bit, but like a wrinkle creases on his eye.
The reason he does it like this, though, is so that doesn't happen.
Right, but then how is he already so old?
Well, he had to learn this.
I guess. The instant the wind swept past, Ash charged forward again, fists already raised to attack Vex. At this close range, she clearly thought she'd have better luck with the feathers, and she fired another volley, aimed wildly, hoping that at least one would make it through his defenses. Naive. 0.1 seconds of Aether, concentrated on 22 areas of barely an inch each, was enough to deflect them. But it's more interesting for us to see his tick rather than hear about it. You know what I mean?
But it all defeats the purpose of him doing it like this, then, if he's visibly aging as well.
Alright. As the feathers bounced off their targets and flew behind Ash, he pulled his fists back, ready to unleash a fatal flurry of punches. But he had miscalculated. As the feathers had flown behind him, they had come back together, fusing into a solid mass, a noose. In an instant, it threw itself around his neck and began to pull himself up towards the ceiling, where the other end of the noose had attached itself. Ash's hands, which had just been ready to begin punching, instead began to claw at the loop that was choking the life out of him. It seemed he'd been the naive one after all. Who was speaking in this line?
It was Balte.
If I were you, I'd kill myself. I really mean that. The words echoed in Aklima's minds. Minds?
Oh, mind, sorry.
The words echoed in Aklima's mind, just as they had done for the last few weeks. The cruel judgment of Balte Kojiro, the man who had watched over her for years. Even though he was now locked away, his words still lingered in her memory. Should it be watched over her?
It should be.
His words still lingered in her memory, resurfacing most often when she was lying awake in bed. They made themselves known once again now, as Acclima did nothing but watch while Ashtel Durin fought to protect her. As he was buffeted by feathers, she had done nothing but watch. As he was pulled up towards the ceiling, she had done nothing but watch. As he was choked to death, she was doing nothing but watching. What was wrong with her? Hadn't she already decided she was going to be strong from now on? Was she really going to prove Kojiro right? If I were you, I'd kill myself. Then she wouldn't be her anymore. She'd find someone better. Acclima let out an ear-splitting scream as she charged at this vexed Terna, greatsword clutched in her hands. She still didn't have Aether, but Ash barely used it either, and he'd managed to put this woman on the back foot, hadn't he? So as long as she remembered her training, she could make it through this. The blade is methodical, Negan Rush had told her, a scalpel by which you dissect fate. Do not allow emotion to move what should remain still. And so she screamed, and so she charged, but she remained calm. Her soul was ice as she swung her sword with all her strength, right at Vex's neck. The woman was still mid-turn, having gone to swing around as soon as she'd heard Acclima's scream, with her wingspan slowing her turn in this cramped hallway that created an opening. She wouldn't get a better moment than this. Acclima slammed the blade into Vex's throat, and the momentum of her slash stopped completely. The blade shook in her hands as Acclima tried to force it, but with no luck. Even with all her strength behind the slash, her sword was incapable of even piercing this woman's skin. It was like she was made of solid steel. Vex blinked as the blade shuddered under her chin. Sorry, she said, voice still dead, as if this didn't even qualify as an attack. Don't take it personally. You're really weak, though. In the end, without Aether, this was all she was capable of. If I were you, I'd kill myself. Just as that thought was settling at the bottom of Acclima's stomach, she heard a sudden wrenching sound, and her eyes darted up to Ash. He'd used the moment of distraction she'd given him well. As the noose had pulled him upwards, he'd flipped upside down, planted his feet against the ceiling, and kicked with all his strength, tearing free the ceiling tile that the noose was attached to. As he fell backwards towards Vex, he swung his neck to spin the noose, and, more importantly, to swing the slab of concrete stuck to the end of the rope. Like a flail, it struck Vex in the face, exploding into chunks and sending her staggering backwards, the dust blinding her for a final fatal instant. Acclima watched wide-eyed as finally Ashtel Durin landed in front of his opponent. Ashtel Durin took a deep breath. Ashtel Durin punched. 0.1 seconds of Aether, repeatedly, at the very moment of impact. I hate to break it to you, Tam, but I think 10 of those is just a second. If it's repeatedly.
Well, yeah, they're just like, that's how long you use it per punch.
It concentrated into the very tips of Ash's knuckles. It was barely even... Oh, I see, he's doing an aura. It was barely even visible, the orange sparks easily mistakable for a trick of the eye. This Aether was not being used to increase the strength of Ash's punches. This Aether was being used to stop his hands shattering from the natural force of his punches. As he punched, Ash's face was expressionless. There was no joy, no sorrow, no regret. The time for such things had passed when the fight had concluded, the moment Vex had looked away from him. The finishing blow was just a formality. Well, finishing blows in this case. Like a machine, Ash rained down punch after punch upon his opponent. Maybe blow after blow? I don't know. You already used blows before. Punch might be good. I don't know. Surely shattering each and every bone he came into contact with. Those red wings were crushed into pulp, feathers flying in every direction. That face was bruised until it was unrecognizable. That body, barely visible behind the blur of Ash's arms, slowly turned a bloody red. Finally, once his opponent had been thoroughly embedded into the wall, Ash turned away. Steam gently rose from the fists clenched at his sides. For her part, Vex Terna was valiant. Even with all the damage Ash had inflicted, she began to tear herself out of the wall, concrete spilling out around her as she struggled against her own ravaged body. With a final brutal tug, she freed herself from her prison, standing once again before her adversary. But it was too late. "Slothful fist," said Ashtel Durin. Flesh tore itself open from the inside, and blood showered down upon Ash. Oh god, I like that, like a freaky fucking American Psycho scene, with like blood dripping like all around his body. Vex, her body punctured at each and every point at which she'd been struck, looked down as if bewildered at the sheer red billowing out from her form. Her eyes grew somehow more solid, more cold, as if some vital spark was disappearing from them. As she slowly fell forward. Oh my god, is she about to awaken? Aether users like this never just die. She's about to have a fucking awakening. I'm calling it now. I'm calling it now. No one with Aether. This is the thing about Aether users. It's really dangerous to ever kill them because they almost always awaken. They never just like die, you know?
Some people do.
I don't know. I don't want to die. The last spark of a fading mind, the last thought before the long sleep, an anchor that could keep her in place, if only for a moment, the rung on a ladder on the side of the cliff, something to keep her from falling into the oblivion below. I guess maybe if you, like, wrapped Neverwire around someone,
Yeah.
and then they wouldn't awaken. I don't want to die. There were things she had to do, responsibilities that had to be upheld. She was the first of the Cardinal Beasts, even if it was a self-given title, even if it didn't mean anything to anyone except for her, even if it had no place here. It was hers. It was her. There was a place for her in this world. I don't want to die. She'd been trusted, hadn't she? Given a job? The Operature had faith in her. The woman who'd taken a god's power for her own had faith in her. A person existed only through their connections with others. Would she really die here and make Lily look like a fool? I don't want to die. I won't die. I can't die. Her foot planted itself down on the ground, keeping her from falling. Her eyes blazed into new life, keeping her from fading. Her voice emerged from her throat as a roar, emotion she hadn't sent out into the world in years. I can't die! She screamed, her life continuing through sheer force of will, her body moving through utter spite. With her last ounce of strength, she lunged forward through the cloud of blood before her and seized hold of Ash Deldurin by the collar, pulling him close. What? It took her a second to realize that Ash had said that. His face was twisted in surprise, and the shadow of fear, his eyes widening to their utmost. I have to say, eyes widening to their utmost is also becoming its own phrase. There's a lot of to their utmost. No one's ever doing it to their opposite of utmost, to their least most. For the first time in this battle, she'd caught him by surprise. Judging by that fear, he probably hadn't been caught by surprise in a long time. During this fight, she'd stuck to the 10% manifestation of her guardian entity, Suzaku. That wasn't because she couldn't handle more power. She was the closest to achieving 100% among the Cardinal Beasts, but because the cramped confines of the ship meant that assuming a larger form would result in her crushing herself. That was the obstacle she needed to kill. Ash Deldurin was moving his hands towards her throat, her exposed throat, to deliver the killing blow. He seemed to move so slowly, barely perceptible. I gotta be honest, I can't believe this last blow didn't kill her. Barely perceptible. Time caught between one heartbeat and the next. What a leisurely way to fight, she thought. She had plenty of time to surpass her limits. When the Cardinal Beasts used their 10% form, they concentrated the power into a single part of their body, so as to maximize its power. When the Cardinals assumed a 50% or 99% form, however, they did so by transforming their entire body. They'd reasoned that focusing greater power would reduce the benefits of their guardian entity physiology. But the truth was, it had just been too difficult for them, hadn't it? They'd faced an obstacle, succumbed to their weakness, and called it reason. Vex gritted her broken teeth beneath her bloody gums. What the hell? If it was impossible, then right now there was no harm in trying. Her blood, technically speaking, was a single part of her body, wasn't it? And right now it was everywhere. Ash's hands were almost at her throat, fingers pointed out like knives, slothful fist. He'd pop her jugular like a balloon. This was the last heartbeat. But that was all she needed. She could see it, after all, beyond her vision, like a light at the end of the tunnel. A burning phoenix, a vermilion bird, its wings spread wide. Let me fix that "it's" for you, buddy. The guardian entity, Suzaku. Vex reached forward and seized hold. Guardian entity, Suzaku, 99%. No. Guardian entity, Suzaku, 100%. Fire roared. Acclima was caught behind reality. Events proceeded too fast for her to comprehend. 1 second, Vex Turna had been utterly defeated. 1 second, Vex Turna had seized Ash by the collar. 1 second, Vex Turna had engulfed them both in flames. It was all the same second. Her mind couldn't keep track. She blinked. At that moment, Acclima was sent flying backwards by the sudden explosion of heat, her legs flailing in the air for a moment before she landed in a heap, sliding by her cheek down the smooth floor of the hallway. Immediately she picked herself up, scrambling to her knees as she beheld the spectacle before her. A fireball was raging around Vex and Ash, the two of them reduced to silhouettes by the flames. A bizarre ringing sound echoed out from the inferno, and for a brief moment Acclima couldn't discern the source, until she realized that was the sound of screaming. Vex screaming in fury as she held on with all her might, and Ash screaming in pain as he tried to wrestle free. With the heat and the fire, Acclima could do nothing but watch with a hand on her forehead as the two fought before her. How long could a person even survive in a fire like that? What should she do? Should she run? Should she try and do something? What could she do? What could she do? What could she do? If I were you, I'd kill myself. I really mean it. Those questions and those words raged through her mind, stilling her step, and so in the end she did nothing. Nothing but listen and hear a resounding crack. Forbidden technique! Teratopsis Dorni! As, for a single second, the flames were snuffed out. Aklaima had no idea what Ash had done. All she could see was his body flopping downwards, like he'd turned to jelly. Crack! Before he suddenly reasserted himself, lashed out and decapitated Vex with a single chop. Aklaima screamed and backed up as the head rolled onto the floor, its eyes wide open and not widened to their utmost?
No. To the least most.
A final long crackle of orange aether ran between those open eyelids before fading out into nothing. A pale Ash collapsed to one knee, panting for breath, skin covered in burns. His eyes flicked up to Aklima's horrified face. Whelan Hath is his, pinpoint martial arts, right?
Well, that's when he, does the compression and then release of force, though, yeah. It's one of his martial arts.
Teratopsis Dorni, he said, chest heaving, as if that meant something to her. A forbidden form of Whelan Hath. I dislocate my entire skeleton at once to release pressure in all directions. If I don't immediately reverse it, it is fatal. So I used more aether than I wanted to. How many years? How many years? With a shaking hand, he wiped the sweat from his brow. And in that moment, he seemed every inch the tired old man he looked like. His wrinkles had deepened like valleys. There we go! This is what I was looking for. And some of his white hair had fallen out onto the floor. Aklaima couldn't help but hurry over. Are you all right? She asked, looking down at the burns that covered his arms. They weren't as bad as she'd expected, but she supposed that was the aether's doing. If his aether tick really was accelerated aging, defense like that must have cost him significantly. As she tore a strip from the pants of her pajamas and began winding it around Ash's arm as a makeshift bandage, the martial artist did his best to wave her off. I'm fine, he wheezed. Leave me be. But leave me be, he snapped. The brief glare he shot at her was enough to send her back. She shut her mouth as she stood up. Her hands were clenched tight in front of her, but not into fists. Fists were for people who could fight, after all. If I were you, things hadn't changed at all since then, had it? She was still something to be thrown around, passed from person to person, exploited for whatever cause her handler desired. The only things that had changed were faces and names. She was still weak. Now, Mr. Deldurin, called out a woman from the end of the... I don't know who this is. Called out a woman from the end of the hallway. Don't be cruel. That's your supreme heir you're talking to. Ash looked up wearily from the floor, and Aklaima followed his gaze. There, walking towards them through the illumination of the flames, was a woman in a glossy white dress. The Commissioner's personal aide, Dariah Todd Harlow. Have we met her yet?
Oh, we have met her. She was being a dick to the toll on the bridge.
Did I remember her voice right?
She didn't say that much, but that was pretty much what she sounded like, yeah.
Aklaima had met her a couple of times at official functions, but she'd always seemed a nervous woman. The sheer confidence on her face right now was completely unfamiliar. I would just say I would just say confidence. We don't need the sheer. Stopping next to the two of them, Harlow nodded down to Vex's corpse. I see you've dealt with the intruder. Ash nodded, slouched on the ground. She was formidable. How did she get aboard? She rammed right through the side of the ship, apparently, Harlow replied. There's another intruder, too, but she's in hand. The Ascendant General and his men should be here soon. My ability is called Reschedule, by the way. Ash looked up at her. Harlow put her hands on her hips, looking back down at him. Reschedule means that the damage from any attack you hit me with is delayed for exactly 24 hours. The condition for activation is... She took a step forward. Wait, did he hit her or something? Did he hit her?
No. Why is she saying such things? Let's continue.
Reschedule means that the damage from any attack you hit me with is delayed for exactly 24 hours. The condition for activation is... She took a step forward. Ashdel Durin hadn't lived this long by ignoring his instincts. The way Harlow was speaking, the way she was moving, the subtle way she was trying to get him into her range, all of it spelled out one thing. This woman was going to murder him. Me when any woman approaches me. It's like, what other reason could there be? He ignored the pain pulsing throughout his body as he moved. In an instant, he was back on his feet. In another instant, he had seized hold of Harlow's arm. And in the final instant, he had flipped and slammed her onto the ground. But it was too late. He'd thrown her with all his strength. He knew that. And yet he'd felt no break of bone, seen no splatter of blood. That was unheard of. And when the dust cleared, he could see that Harlow, still on the ground, didn't have a scratch on her. The tiny smile on her face hadn't faded in the slightest. "The condition for activation," she said, "is me telling you about it." He'd done no damage to the woman, but the floor beneath them had finally had enough. With a mighty crash, it collapsed in on itself, sending all three of them, Ash, Clima, and Harlow, hurtling into the abyss of the maintenance tunnels below. The only person remaining in the ruined hallway, if it could still be called a person, was the corpse of Vex Turna. It lay, splayed out, one leg dangling over the hole in the floor. Its severed head rested just outside the reach of its pale, broken hand. That dead face stared off into the empty, its face utterly still. That is, utterly still until its lips started moving. "Like I'd die," it mouthed silently. Like I'd die. Like I'd die. I have a job to do." Blank eyes exploded into incandescent fireballs, and a wave of aether engulfed the hallway. I knew it. See? Never without the awakening with these fuckers. You know when they got the big aether, it's coming. Do we know this character that's speaking?
Oh, we do. We've met her. She was the other one of Commissioner Caesar's aides.
Yo, Caesar! Michael Kerberos called out over the rock. Was that his voice?
It's a woman, but yeah. That was basically it.
Okay. Yo, Caesar! Michael Kerberos called out
Angelo?
over the rocks, with no mind for discretion. If they hadn't been where they were, Caesar might have admonished her for her lack of discretion. As it was, all she could do was sigh at the other woman's boisterousness as she looked... Is it supposed to be Mikhail?
No.
Michael, okay. As it was, all she could do was sigh at the other woman's boisterousness as she looked over her shoulder. "Yes," she said, tearing herself away from the battle for a moment. Michael pulled her script out of the cloak she was wearing over her painfully lacking armor and tapped a finger against it. "We got a ding from Harlow," she said, scratching at her hair with her free hand. "That means she's engaged the target, right?" "That's right, Miss Kerberos." Without another word, Caesar turned back to her hunt, but a satisfied smile lingered on her lips. This was a very good sign. Harlow had been instructed to make her move after the Tartarus had lost power, so Caesar had been expecting to hear back since she saw the vermilion bird taking off, but it was always good to have confirmation. Now, all Caesar had to do was finish off Dragon Hadrian. Now, all Dariah had to do was finish off the Supreme Heir. Wait, is Caesar, doing a coup? What's going on here?
She's got plans. Plots and plans, it seems.
This is just a canon event.
It's strange, because last time we saw her, she was fighting Dragon. Where's Dragon?
I think he's fucking dead. Oh, he's probably in fucking Gemini World or some shit. Oh, no, because he's been disabled. How long does that last, you think?
Who knows?
My throat is so dry. What's the fun fact so I can get a drink of water?
Fun fact. Could you have a topic, at least, please?
It's hard because every topic I want to ask is stuff that
Right,
I think
not
you would
relevant,
say. Yeah, so it's hard for me to just think of a random thing. Okay, how about this? Tell me about what Dragon's favorite piece of media was growing up, like book or TV show or comic or something.
His favourite TV show was called Astral Warriors, and basically, from our perspective, it was sort of like a Power Rangers sort of thing, where the Supreme Rangers would transform into famous figures in the Supremacy to fight the evil Star King.
Why is every piece of Supremacy media about the previous Supremes? Do they have any original stories?
Well, it's like FGO versions of the previous Supremes.
It's like there's so much propaganda in the Supremacy. I don't think we've learned about a single thing that doesn't revolve around the Supremes and previous Supremes. It's so heavy, Tam.
Well, it wasn't necessarily previous Supremes. It was famous people from Supremacy history.
I see. So it was sort of like those cheesy after-school cartoons.
Yeah, they would always. It's a historical thing as well. It's like, who's that guy who transformed into Supremacy Red? Well, I'm glad you were Supremacy Blue. That was blah 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 blah, and he did this.
Was there an episode about Negan Rush at any point?
No.
Did it end before that? How many seasons did it have?
It had 5 seasons, but it was an old show by the time Dragon watched it, but they got like repeats on the Crestpool.
What was its most controversial episode?
The episode where they covered Damien Hirst, who was a guy who was originally UAP but came over to Supremacy and became a big warrior, but people always suspected that he was like still a UAP sort of operative with no real proof. But like when they covered him, he was accused of being like propaganda.
What was their highest rated episode? Oh yeah, that's when they cut the line at propaganda with Supreme Media. But what was the highly rated episode?
It was highly rated episode. Well, it wasn't like they wouldn't really get critical reviews of this show, but the season finale, the series finale, where they brought back all the previous Ranger actors to fight the Star King once and for all.
How many seasons did it have
5.
again? That's pretty short. So it was like a tokusatsu thing, or was it animated? Okay. And did Dragon ever used to play like as one of these characters? Did he want to be a hero when he was a kid?
He liked to dress up as one of the Rangers once, but it was embarrassing.
Who was his favorite Ranger?
Supremacy Blue.
And what did he like about Supremacy Blue?
He was the smart one.
Oh,
he was the one
Supremacy Cogitant.
Like, be like,
I see, Blue Cogitant.
He'd be like, oh no, they're using photon rays to deflect our attacks. He would do like the technobabble.
Do you want to hear the most insane thing?
Mm-hmm.
I have this pretentious friend. There's a friend you know from way back when.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
But his parents did not let him watch SpongeBob because it was like unintelligent, like rabble trash TV. But they did let him watch Jimmy Neutron because it promoted science and smartness from what he thought. Which, if you've seen Jimmy Neutron, is not the case.
Great.
All right. Well, anytime someone like tells me that their parents didn't let them watch SpongeBob growing up, the fucking music plays in my head. That's your canon event.
This guy hasn't even seen Across the Spider-Verse.
I know. My friend. I'm not gonna wait till Tuesday. I think I might get a ticket tomorrow. I just need to watch it.
It's very good. I recommend it.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys next time. Bye.